Hi, Alex.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Jesse.
First of all, hi everyone to Community Voices.
Voices.
This is a running series, usually hosted by Felipe. And I'm saying hi from sunny Berlin. And very happy to have here Jesse Grimes. Jesse, how are you today?
I'm good. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, very happy to have you. I don't know if this has happened for other episodes, but we have met each other in real life.
I know we have. In fact, I thought you were here in the Netherlands, but it sounds like you're in Berlin.
I'm here on a conference, UX Healthcare in Berlin. Actually, I'm co-organizing a conference. So
I saw the news on LinkedIn.
Yeah. I see a lot of people hear me double. That's extremely annoying. Yeah, we apologize, everybody. We're having a little bit of a technical snafu. So I'm going to talk as little as possible and give the stage to Jesse. So let's get started. Jesse, tell us about you. Who you are, what do you do?
Sure. So I'm Jesse Grimes. I came to the service design world in about 2008. So I've been doing it for quite a long time. In about a decade before that, I was doing UX design consulting, strategy consulting. I'm from the States originally, but I've lived and worked essentially outside the States ever since I finished university. And I switched into service design again in around 2008 to build up the practice here in the Netherlands. I live in Amsterdam at a Dutch agency. And I was looking for this change from the kind of very siloed focus of what UX work was to something that was a bit more strategic, a bit more holistic, and service design really fit the bill for me. I became a freelancer about 5 or 6 years ago, and starting towards the end of the job I had prior to becoming a freelancer, and certainly as a freelancer, I've done a lot of work with startups. And I know that's kind of the basis of the talk. I'm happy to answer specific questions, but that's kind of what I've focused on. And it's been a very interesting niche to have. And also around 2008, a little later than that, I became involved in the SDN. I put some dusty journalism education I had to first volunteering with Touchpoint, which is our journal. And that quickly became a role where I'm now the editor-in-chief. And then several years ago, in addition to being on the leadership team for the organization, I decided that, or I helped with Birgit Mager, who's the president of the SDN, to co-found our academy. We felt there was a real good opportunity to offer training as one of the things the SDN does. So the SDN work, my volunteer roles are always on the side of my day-to-day work, but that's all been very rewarding.
So many questions. So before we start, Jesse, what's the term service design?
Say it again. Now I'm going to struggle a little with what's my definition of the term?
No, when was the first time you heard it? What was the first contact?
Well, so that's interesting. Actually, I want to say 2001, I was working in London, and a colleague of mine, Ben Reason, went on to found LiveWork. And he left the agency that we were both working at. I went to Australia to first for a sabbatical and then to work there. But I was always aware that service design was starting up, and I wanted to do it. And in fact, it was one of the reasons I left Australia to move back to Europe to find these opportunities here. So I guess my awareness of it goes back to around 2002, maybe 2003. But it took me another year or so before I could really shift myself and do it for my work.
I think that leads to some questions, but I want to keep the conversation moving forward. You mentioned that you're working like startups. So I think that's interesting because as consultants, we go to the large organizations. So tell us more about why did you choose to work with startups? Choose the path of most resistance, some would say.
It is, and It is. And I mean, like I said at the beginning, I do think it's quite a niche approach for where service designers work. I think I've always kind of joked, if you took 100 service designers and you counted where they're working, probably 60% of them work in banks. And then if you split up the rest, it's going to be other big organizations, the public sector to some extent, but you're going to find probably in the single digits people who are really in startups. The opportunity came about because I was working I've worked with all the big Dutch banks over the years, and I had the chance to work in one of their accelerator programs where they were coaching startup teams within a very specific context to build up and scale up and hopefully become standalone businesses. That was the first time that I got to sit down with people who, I mean, I've seen it in my private life, people starting up businesses, but really working in a service design context for someone who's trying to understand what their business model is, trying to understand who their customers are. What are we going to bring to the market? Do people really want this? And I found that really stimulating. It was, if you work for a big bank or big organization, you can kind of predict day to day what you're doing. It's going to look the same, kind of similar from this 6 months to the next 6 months. And I really liked this idea that every day I was going into work. And I mean, to be honest, some of the teams I work with, the startup got killed. The funding was shut down because they couldn't demonstrate progress or traction. But those that stayed on were asking these fundamental questions about, what are we going to do? And I found that the work and the mindset that I brought was really helpful, not least because I was challenging the founders and the small teams these questions about, like, okay, who are your customers? Do they really want this thing that you think they want? And it's not, I don't think, rocket science and there's a lot of, if you read the startup literature and things like that, of course, a lot of people say, you have to demonstrate that there's traction with your idea amongst the people you want to sell it with. But I've never met a startup founder who just wasn't convinced every morning when they got their idea was going to sell in the millions and that people were going to bang down the door to sign up. But I also very rarely see that happening. So I just found this nice role of asking them tough questions. They kind of quickly saw the value that I added when I was doing not just the customer research side, but also mapping what their service will look like from the experience side. And that was the first opportunity. And then through that and other connections, I was able to find more work. And it's been my focus for the last years.
That you're not somebody that's also working with startups. Sometimes it feels like our role is to poke holes in the boat.
Yeah, I think so. Again, and in the beginning, it can be kind of ironic. It's hard to get them to understand who you are, what your value is. I've got to say the benefit, and I've wrote about this a bit when I talk about this work I do, and service designers working in these contexts. It's often easier to work in something like an accelerator where your bill, your invoice, your hours are being paid by something bigger outside the startup. It's a rare startup who knows that service design is something that will benefit them, but those where it's who can take advantage of your services because you're in the context of something like an accelerator or an innovation lab, don't have that question. And then once you're there, you just become this kind of good sparring partner. And what I always say is there's kind of three things that I do. I don't think a startup needs a service designer full time, if I'm really honest. They have so much other stuff going on, and you're not, I mean, within a bank, you could be mapping customer journeys until the cows come home, right? It's a big complex service with tons of problems, tons of staff, lots of touch points that the experience happens on. A startup in the beginning is very, very, well, first a bit ambiguous what they're doing, and then when it grows, by nature, it's very small. So I don't think there's the role of a service designer full-time, but design research on its own, I think is something we can do. So design research, service design, and then the third thing as business design are really how I present myself and how my work gets split up. At some times in the process, it might be more the service design side. Sometimes it's design research. In the beginning, and then to some extent going later, I put on a business designer hat and look at things like the business model, what's the value proposition, things like that. So I think it's an important caveat when I say that I do this work. I'm not 100% doing service design all the time. I have to kind of be a bit of a chameleon and figure out what is it that they're looking to do and where can I add value, and then not really get so stuck with the name I call myself, and rather just adapt and do the work that helps them. And that is often bigger than service design.
Relate to that very much. It's in the fact that you're going to have to wear different hats and be like, okay, do they journey map? Do they need a service blueprint? First validate, or do they need more research? And I really love your approach on going through the accelerator, because let's face it, startups are strapped. And you wrote very interesting piece about the role of service startup on touch point. Could you give like a short summary if you haven't read it? And maybe through that we can go into your work with touch point.
Sure. So again, I think one of what I was just talking about is that the role in my eyes, you need to be, again, a bit of a chameleon. You have to recognize, first of all, startups don't think that service design is something they need. And I think that comes a lot out of the fact that the startup culture, the literature, the processes they follow have come out of Silicon Valley. And as you know, service design does not have the penetration in Silicon Valley as it does compared to Western Europe, for example. So when you read Lean Startup, you're not going to find things saying that you need service designers. So already there's a bit of a challenge for just the recognition of what you do. And I think the way that you can get over that is to demonstrate your value early on and not really, as I said, stick to the name and say, you need a service designer. And yes, you've never heard of me, but I'm here and I'm going to help you. But rather make it concrete what value you can add. And again, that's visualizing what the experience is like, testing that the proposition is going to work with potential customers or customers, understanding who those customers are, and then again, shift a bit more towards business design, helping them with a business model. I think a lot of startups, again, they basically think we've got a great idea. All we need to do is the money to build it and launch it, and we're going to be a success. They don't know really the value of sitting down and mapping out the business model canvas, or figuring out what the value proposition is, or running experiments. So I think once you can establish yourself and they understand what you're doing, also try to focus on delivering value by playing those different roles. And I think that's mostly what I wrote about in that article. That was a bigger issue all about startups and innovation context. So I wasn't certainly not the only person contributing there. If you Google, maybe someone can put a link in the chat here. If you Google it, Touchpoint and then service design for innovation, I think it was called. There's a lot of articles, of which that one I wrote is in there.
Recommend that article. It was really insightful.
Great, good to hear.
I want to apologize to everybody. My audio is very weird. No idea why. It was fine and then it broke. I'm really sorry. So I'm gonna try to speak as little as possible.
It's okay.
I want to talk now about the master classes, because there is series of master classes coming out soon, and you have a module there. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. So this is now a bit more with my SDN Academy hat on. The Academy has been around for, I think, 6 years. We've given a lot of courses over the years. A lot of them have been quite niche courses on a specific topic, leadership, for example. However, a few years ago, we came up with our first accreditation program. So the SDN offers accreditation. We have 3 levels: practitioner accreditation, professional accreditation, and master accreditation. Those are accreditations that we give through an existing process that you demonstrate your skills and you meet with a committee and show your work. But several years ago, we introduced a course that delivers practitioner accreditation. And I think, in fact, last week started the 7th edition of it. That's been super successful. And that's essentially for people who are wanting to become a service designer. They learn the basics, they get access to the resources of the SDN. We decided at the beginning of this year to start to create the next accreditation program, which delivers professional accreditation. We called it the master classes because our approach is different. Unlike practitioner accreditation, where over the course of the course, you follow the way a service design project normally works. For the master classes series, we basically said, okay, we want to upskill experienced service designers, people who already have a career. Our concept is that there's a minimum of 2 years experience, but I see the people signing up, and there's people also there with 10 years of experience. So it's not as long as it's not for someone starting, I think it's relevant for experienced service designers. And what we said was, there's a lot of things that service designers should know. It's not just how do you run a project now, but it's things like systems thinking and sustainability, AI. Indeed, I'm teaching a course myself, or a module of the course, on service design for startups and ventures. Design leadership is in there. So over the course of eight weeks, we've got 8 modules, each of them taught by a specific trainer. And these are all kind of experts that we've invited, people that have often a connection with the SDN for a long time. So over those 8 weeks, there's 8 modules taught by an individual trainer. They have a mix of lectures, assignments, reading. We make a lot of use of the huge resources that the SDN has. Touchpoint, you mentioned, we've got case studies, things like that, videos of our conference. So the students will get that expertise, get that knowledge across these 8 modules, and at the end also have the professional accreditation from the SDN. We started selling this about 2 months ago, which was, of course, a little bit of a challenge, at least in Europe, to get people to pay attention to work things while they're in a summer break. But it's been, so there was a quiet first month of sales. I think we'll announce it today. We've just sold out. So the course begins tomorrow. We've sold out. We've filled up all the number of seats. Thank you. I will begin it tomorrow with a short session. Birgit Mager is joining us as well. And then on Monday, the first module begins with Chris Ferguson. We have one pause during the conference week in Helsinki, and then it continues until let's say the second half of November. There, so Marie, thank you, Marie. There's a link in the chat for those that want to read about the course. I shouldn't have said that it sold out, but we will have another edition. So leave your name and email address on that page.
I have a question. Because you said more people who are already here. So if it's live, it's a lecture. I think that would be very important for people to know.
Sure. So it's live. I mean, what we're doing, we've got 2 live, just like this, although on Zoom, 2 live sessions a week on the Monday and the Thursday. So the participants first have the theory, the learning, the lecture aspect on a Monday. That's a 90-minute session. Takes place at 6 p.m. in European time. So we also chose a time zone that allows people from North America to join. Then there's a collaboration session, we call it, on Thursday, and that's a chance, again, for the students, the participants, to get together with the trainer, discuss the assignment that they've been working on. But aside from those 2, let's say, Zoom sessions, there's also individual work. We made an explicit choice to not create the necessity to team up with people from the course. That can be a little bit of a challenge when it comes to time zones and things like this. So besides the 2 Zoom sessions, it is a self-learning approach. You have access, the participants have access to course materials. They have an assignment that they need to work on and submit by the end of the week. And I think it's also super important to say that the instructors or the trainers give feedback on those assignments. So if you're asked to do something around organizational change, for example, that assignment is going to get reviewed by the trainer, and you're going to get feedback on it.
I love that. I have to say, I love that you don't have to work in teams. But coordinating, it's very complicated. The way to focus on the learning part.
It can be a challenge. Yep.
So I see we have a lot of questions. So I'd say let's put some on the screen. Are there any takeaways at moments? Your way of working.
I think, and maybe this does go back a little bit to the work I do with startups, but I think more generally, in fact, I'm starting some new client work recently, and I can see this becomes a role. I think it's important for us as service designers, on one hand, to really try to champion our discipline and make sure that people understand what we do and support, whether we work for an agency and we try to get new business, or we're working in-house and we need to get people to understand what we do and deliver value. That's really important. But at the same time, there's this need, I think, also by the nature of the work that we do, to be adaptable and to not be super rigid about this is what a service designer does and this is why you need us, but rather demonstrate our value and do the things that we can do without such a big concern. I mean, really, ironically, if I look at a new client that I'm working with, if I find my job title in the Slack group, it says UX and UI designer. Now, I can't change it. I tried to edit it, and that field has got a padlock on it. But I'm not. Maybe some years ago I would have been a bit annoyed. Say, come on, call me a service designer. I might still, because there's the risk that I'm going to be misunderstood, perhaps. But I also know that very quickly, if people understand what I do through my interactions with them, through the work that I deliver, that's super important. So I think that's a bit of a kind of a takeaway, is to deliver the value that we can through demonstrating it in the people we bring together, the workshops we run, the deliverables we make, and don't maybe just kind of stamp up and down and try to force people to understand this thing. That's I think it's an important learning.
But none of the labels.
Yeah, I mean, again, look at it. It's ironic because I also want the SDN to champion our practice and grow it around the world, and that is very important. But at the same time, for an individual's context, deliver the value that you can, and that's a great way to get people to see what service designers do.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much for that. So next question. Industry impact does the SDN accreditation have?
So
I think it's a very big topic.
Sure. So actually, accreditation came up. I think we created as a concept before we had the academy, or at least in the beginning it was also a little bit disconnected. And it came up because we saw from the industry, from the community, that people wanted it. There's a lot of places out there, certainly to begin with, there's a lot of people that call themselves service designers who, I think if you would challenge them with the most fundamental questions, they're not yet service designers. They're people that come from a design background and they think, okay, service design is important. I'm just going to call myself a service designer. But if you would test them, they might not do the job, and maybe they damage our discipline by calling what they do service design and creating this kind of mixed impression of what that discipline is. So we responded to this by creating this accreditation program. The idea that as the SDN reviews and recognizes your skills as a service designer, then other people can understand that you're accredited. So that was the basis of it. Again, it was in response, and not only also from the agency side, people, not just individuals, people that were selling service design to clients wanted to have the let's say the reinforcement that a global organization that has represented this for 20 years also says that these people know what they're doing when they call themselves service designers. So we responded to that. I wouldn't say there's a specific industry or place where it's more popular. I do think some countries value accreditation more than others, but we've seen it's very important in general and within the academy with the 2 courses we teach. That's a driver for people who take our professional accreditation coming up and the practitioner that we've run for years now.
Thank you so much for that. And I think there is a lot of value to it, if nothing else, to support your own knowledge. Mm-hmm. And have that boost of confidence. And be like, now I can say that I am this.
Yep, exactly.
So we have another question. How can you effectively embed service design culture into startup as a new hire?
It's a good question.
A lot of people looking for jobs and thinking, I'm here. Like,
yeah, I mean, I think, as I said, first, just demonstrate your value generally by creating the questions and the discussions that a service designer should be thinking about. Again, who's our customer? What's the experience we're going to be doing looking like? And do that through workshops. Do that through bringing people together around a table and say, okay, have we ever really sat down to map out the future customer experience? And people will quickly say, yes, we've got a Figma flow that shows what the app is going to look like. But then you say, well, actually, how did they hear of our service to begin with? Was that on social media? What was that sign up like? If it's a startup that's going to have a physical presence somehow in stores, that's not going to be on an app. So what does that look like? That mindset shift that you can bring by creating these discussions then demonstrates kind of why you're there, what value you bring. So I would say do that. Start by bringing people together to do the things you do as service designers, and then hopefully you make it real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's it. Decide what the value is, how you bring, and it will depend on the organization as well. So, another way is service design, helping startups. Strategize. What do you think about this, Jesse?
I think it's a good comment. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I see a question there. I think it's great to see that someone else has also been doing it. One thing that she's touching on, and I think is important, and it's something I talked a little bit about, this kind of lean startup and the startup approach. She talks about also product and service offerings, and I talk about this in the article. There's even a semantic challenge when you get into this world of startups, that they use this language around products, product owners, product designers, and we're here with a service designer's perspective. I kind of joke, but I don't get too adamant about it, that we're designing a service. We're not designing a product, and that semantic something is a challenge. But if you're, and this, by the way, I hope to be a whole article, a whole issue of Touchpoint in the future, product management, product ownership, that is there's a natural tension there, and startups often follow that model between you product owners who say, well, I'm going to own the end-to-end experience, and what's the service designer here for? But in reality, when you look at it, they still have this narrow focus that we don't have as a service designer. We sit above them. So just one thing in that comment resonated to me. That's another challenge.
I think you're totally correct. Now it's really about the echo. It's a challenge. And also positioning yourself in the organization and not be that emissary of bad things. I have experienced product owners thinking that I come in to tell them how to do their job, or that they're doing it incorrectly. And that's friction. There's a lot of friction.
Yes, you can. Yeah, I mean, again, if you're an innovator or an accelerator and you have the luxury of being able to critique people, then it's less dangerous than if it's your only client. But it is important to do that, I think. There's so it's time to wrap up.
Thank you so much, Jesse, for helping us.
Okay, you're welcome.
If there's anything that a short tip for the audience as they continue their journey in service design, what advice could you give them?
Read Touchpoint.
Sweet, short and sweet. Perfect.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much for everyone who joined. Thank you so much, Jesse. I apologize again for the audio. I generally don't know what happened. Technology. But we still have, there are no tickets for the global conference in person, but there's still online. And you can also get a discount. It's now on the screen, and we hope to see you there. Shauna, thank you so much for joining us. Who's in the background? This call helping us. I appreciate you. Thank you for your time. Thank you, everybody. And see you next week with better audio.
Goodbye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye. Are we done?